Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Recruit Season 1, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So I saw the rest of the episode titles. I think it's so neat that every episode title is an acronym, because this is going to be the show, and I think that's them kind of poking fun at just like everything's an acronym, and it's like, because even in the first episode, he's like, okay, like there's so many acronyms getting thrown at me, like how am I supposed to, and it's like, yeah, the title of this episode basically stands for Never Let Them See You Pucker. And it's basically like, hey, keep up your poker face so that no one ever sees, like, because that's their boss's thing to do. He was like, now which one of you effed up? And he's like, I'm just kidding. Like, just kidding. Good poker faces, people, except for you, because I saw you pucker. He's like, sorry, sir. He's like, better work on that. And I love, like, obviously, once again, he's still super fresh at all of this, and no one taught him the ins and outs. Like, obviously, Lester and Violet should have given him the heads up. They're like, oh, wait, this is your first meeting, isn't it? It's like, yeah. Why? They didn't give him the heads up about, and everyone's talking in code, and I was hoping he'd catch on, but I was like, okay, you've listened to enough examples. It's like, you have to be keeping things super vague. And then he started getting too specific with his situation. Everyone's like, oh, gee, come on. Everyone gets up and walks away. He's like, what did I do wrong? It's like, you spilled the beans on what you're working on. No one wants to know, because eventually at some point in time, something related to the CIA is going to get you in front of some committee or something, and nobody wants to get dragged into whatever BS, because them having knowledge about what you were up to, it's like, it makes them viable people to get drawn in as well. It's like, oh, did you hear so-and-so? Like, the whole point is, I mean, it goes with the spy craft, plausible deniability. Like I said, like, the, like, really intricate stuff they're getting into, like, I mean, I don't watch a lot of spy fiction. I've watched some stuff here and there that has, like, spy fiction elements to it. But obviously, it's, like, it's always such a smaller part. Like, obviously, like I said, we're getting, like, very behind-the-scenes stuff, because it's, like, these people aren't the, like, action star. These are the people who help out the action star. It's, it almost kind of reminds me of, like, it's kind of like Damage Control, as well as that TV show, the DC show, that was Powerless. Basically, it's like, hey, we basically supply people in the city with stuff they need to protect themselves when superheroes like end up wrecking the show, wrecking the city. It's that type of shtick. So it almost feels like that, where it's like, right, we're the people behind the heroes, or rather, we're the ones who kind of we're the ones who give the information. We're the ones talking to people. Like I said, it feels like such an interesting take on spy fiction, but once again, I just admit it, I don't watch enough of it to really say, but I've watched enough to be like, oh, it's playing into some of the tropes, but also kind of giving you a different lens from a different character's perspective. Not like it's the heroes, but the hero isn't your stereotypical, like, typical, like, what you'd expect from, like, a spy thriller hero, like, so. I mean, just because obviously they came out around, like, obviously a week or two apart, maybe, yeah, a week apart, like The Recruit versus like Jack Ryan, and just comparing Owen to Jack. So it's just kind of like, that's the lens I kind of view this whole situation through. But yeah, I just thought that was such an interesting like thing, and obviously learning more and more about Lester and Violet, about how you could tell from the very beginning they're very conniving. Like, oh, what are you up to? Oh, you need any help? It's like, yeah, you're the ones that sent me to Yemen and ended up because of your actions, I ended up getting tortured. You guys kind of screwed me over. Even later on, he's like, yeah, my black passport was actually given to me like 5 days ago before I left for Yemen. It's like, Violet was like, oh, I haven't seen it. And Violet's like, oh, I must have got mixed up with my mail or something like that. And he's like, yeah, I'm sure. So it's like, oh man. Also showing once again, like, just, you always see like the politics of it, but you're like, even in-house, even in the CIA, like in-house, the politics of like, yeah, like it's a very cutthroat place. Even poor Giannis, he's like, oh, and their boss being like, yeah, don't give me that sleep like apnea thing or whatever it is. Like, he was narcolepsy. Don't tell me about the whole narcolepsy thing. I don't care even if your doctor did give me a note. I'm like, oh, dude. Poor Giannis, he gets the rough end of the deal. And it's like, because I love that Owen tried to bribe him with pills, and he's like, well, I don't need to stay awake anymore, so that's not going to work. So it's like, Yeah, or I couldn't tell our boss that you lied to him. It's like, really, you do that? And he's like, yeah, I'm just learning. Hey, everyone keeps telling me I need to learn the game. Well, I'm learning the game and I'm starting to play it. So it's a sad thing of like to kind of survive in this world. He's going to have to kind of become a bit of a, he's going to have to become like everyone else. It's like you came in here almost a little hopeful. It's almost like, hey, we need to beat that hope out of you. We need you to be just as kind of scummy and kind of as broken as everyone else in this building. It kind of feels like that's kind of like the approach they're taking in all of this. Plus, on top of this, he's got the Max situation, which he's still trying to figure out. He's also got the whole aspect of, cool, I'm getting subpoenaed by the senator that's trying to come after my boss and just wants dirt on my boss, so kind of stuck in that situation. And obviously he has both Hannah and Terrence like super worried about him when it comes to everything, and he's just trying to figure out how to navigate and figure this whole thing out, try to get leverage over Max. Like, how do you trust your client? It's like, no, what you like, knowledge isn't power, it's leverage. So use that in a situation. You have to go out there and find the truth for yourself. That way, it doesn't matter whether your client's telling you the truth or not, because they're all, I think at that moment, it also proves to you how often your client lies. If you know the truth and they're lying to you consistently, it's like, okay, so I can't trust anything that comes out your mouth. So there's that element to it. Speaking of Max, we did get a little back story for her from like 5 years ago when she was in Belarus. And we saw her handler, which at first I was like, is that not Bob? But based on, because we know that not Bob is the current Secretary of State. And I was like, that guy, I guess he's kind of a middle management handler, because I guess maybe he wasn't always her direct person, but maybe that guy worked for Not Bob, and he was kind of like the in-between between Max and Not Bob, or maybe Not Bob was just the overseer of all the operations, and that guy specifically was her handler. The guy that Owen meets with like near the end of the episode, that guy. Once again, that whole aspect of like paper, like the whole thing of, hey, these particular records couldn't give me any answers the other day when I asked, could these ones? It's like, yeah, we keep like very specific records that aren't necessarily going to be on the main record. So what are you looking for? Oh, you're going to have to sign out all these forms. I'm like, oh my God, literal paperwork. And he's like, no, I'm just messing with you. What name? It's like, yeah, it's probably going to take a while, because not only this computer was made in 96, plus I am also going to have to find the hard file copy. Turns out there was nothing. And I do love that it's a conversation with Hannah later on when she was like, yeah, they put your name on that subpoena and they can't even spell it right. He's like, misspelled it. Right, on an official document, they misspelled it. So he went to that guy again and was like, yo, let's look up Max's name, but let's misspell it. Because, yeah, they most likely got rid of every version of her, like they got rid of everything that had her name spelled right. But in every single document, especially for someone who had been active for years working with the CIA, you're telling me they got spelled her name exactly right. There's got to be some document. So he's like, here's like 100 different variations of her name being misspelled. Hey, if you can think of a few, throw them in there. Guy's like, honestly, that's really smart. He's like, I know. I thought that was pretty dope. But sadly, whoever it was super thorough. It's like, wait, what's that? All the misspelling variations? Literally, nope. They were removed too. The only one that was left, he's like, yeah, acrylic's kind of hard to like, so they spelled her name wrong. Most of the files redacted. So that's what led him to the end and later on in the episode. I was like, it was a really smart idea. I was like, that's so interesting. Cause like there typically is going to be like in a whole bunch of documents, there's going to at least be one, no matter how like, cause no matter how meticulous you're going to be, there's going to be some oversight somewhere. But like, no, whoever did this, except for that one document, that heavily redacted document, like everything else was taken. So they did a thorough job, like scorched earth when it came to Max, being like, we're making everything disappear. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, like I was bringing up before, Max ended up getting attacked. And even Owen had to ask his boss, was like, was this us, sir? He's like, I know you didn't just ask me. The CIA, which is not legally supposed to operate on domestic soil. It's like, I mean, there's no way they've always kept up to that. I'm sure there's plenty of things like, no, that was a CIA thing. And it's just like, TV shows even go like, yeah, the CIA bends the rules sometimes with that. So it's, even TV shows lean into that. So it's like, it's like, right, I hope you're not asking what, he's like, no, I'm not asking that, sir. It turns out it wasn't actually the CIA, it was Talco, because it's like, yeah, I mean, you did burn acid in their face. To be fair, it wasn't really, well, she probably had to know somebody was going to be watching that storage locker. So, not storage locker, the storage unit. She had to figure someone was going to. I mean, that's why she had it booby trapped in the first place. Which I love that Hannah was like, fine, here's the last bottle of Adderall you're getting from me, but next time I'm gonna booby trap it. And in that moment, like, it ends up having PTSD for the last episode, and he just goes, huh. It's like, yeah, that's a lot you're kind of having to deal with. In all honesty, he's handling it pretty well, but I think that's also the point of like, yeah, it's so crazy, and he's compartmentalizing everything by like bottling it up, because he's talking to some people, but he's keeping a lot of that to himself. So it does suck that he ended up having to go to Violet and Lester for help, and they're basically setting up a honey pot. And it's like, that seems so twisted that you're doing that to your employee. I mean, your coworker, because they're like, oh, let's get Amelia in here. She'll be able to give us the information. It's like, yeah, but she'll want something in return. It's like, dude, we'll be doing her a favor getting her involved in all of this. So they're setting him up with Amelia, which Amelia, like, because they had brought it up earlier in the episode to him about the whole dating protocol of like, oh, like if you're dating in-house, and he's like, oh, I thought that was only an issue from I mean, I get, and it makes sense, because you never want to be in a situation where like the agency is like, right, you never want to be in a, it's like, yeah, you wear condoms. It's like, yeah, I'm wearing one right now, because you don't ever want to be caught in a situation where like someone from a foreign agency or some situation could be used to blackmail you, because it's like, hey, you have a kid and now we have all this leverage over you type of thing. It's for the protective stuff like that. But now it's like, oh, you're doing that in-house to him to some extent. So, which Amelia is kind of like, I think, fine with it, but she also does know the deal of like, yeah, I'm supposed to also be spying on him, because they were also going through his trash earlier, because they're trying to like boost their own career, because it's like, hey, like any like results he gets, if they can kind of snatch it away from him, keep in the know and get a little bit ahead of him, they can go present it to the boss and they can look like winners, and kind of, it's like, hey, you snooze, you lose, newbie. It's, they're trying to catch the wave, and bolster their own careers and get a big win over the newbie who's only been here a week at this point in time, stumbling across a Grady Miller situation. So I do love that when he went to visit Max, he tried to pay off the guard, and he was like flipping through his cash, and he pull out 10. I was like, oh, you're gonna throw a couple hundreds her way, and it's like, oh, it's literally, you're only gonna give her like 10 or something. It looked like it was a 10. So I was like, I mean, you're probably not the richest person anyway. I was like, I don't know if like he was legitimately not, like if maybe he had like 100 or so, or maybe some 50s, but or 20s, and he just didn't bother. He was just like, I'm gonna go for the cheaper option. Max ended up having to be the one to pay off the guard. But I thought it was interesting. There was this kind of better understanding of Max now. I kind of stepped away from it earlier about the Belarus thing, but basically her situation got blown, not because they found out about her being a spy, it's because she pissed off the wrong mobster and they came after her. So, but Owen kind of figures like, right, I get why you're being very hush-hush. You're being very selective because you're trying to tell me as little information as possible, because if your spyhood ever got found out, you can never go back to Belarus. You're trying to pick up your life there. It was a double life you were leading, but once again, they don't know about the double life you were leading. That was personal shit that led to you ended up not being able to stay in Belarus. So now it's a situation of, if I'm able to go back, I just want to go back home. I want to keep as much of my life intact. But that's why she doesn't want to tell too much information, because if she's selective about it, she can keep her identities in check and she could go back home without much issue. But if it comes out, all this information and like her situation as a spy is revealed, there's no going back home to Belarus, because it's like you're going to be in deep shit if that ends up happening. So it's kind of a I scratch your back, you scratch my back situation. She's the one that actually helped him figure out the whole thing with the senator being like, oh no, he's not actually trying to actually subpoena subpoena you in court. Jesus, I stumbled through that. He's not trying to actually subpoena you in court. He just wants dirt on your boss. And the moment you give him that, the subpoena will go away. Don't know if that's actually, well, he almost, I don't know if Owen actually did anything about that, but it's still kind of like, are you serious? That's what this is really about. It's like, I mean, he already knows, like, the senator and his boss, like, hate each other, so. He was able to resolve the Tulko situation by being the mediator, and that ended up with him having to give all of Max's money to him. Now the question then becomes like, well, Max was kind of upset by that because, well, for one, it's like, he has all my money, but how can I also guarantee? I mean, that kind of sets her back massively, but also it's like, how can I be so sure that he's going to keep up his end of the deal? So she's threatening the lady that tried to shank her in prison. It's like, cool, you work for me now. You're going to be my double agent. You're going to tell me everything that Tulko is up to. You're going to feed him lies. And if he tries to kill me again, you're going to warn me about it. Because if you don't, I'm not going to hurt your child. And she even admits that she had a daughter. I wonder if her daughter back in Belarus or something like that, or did something happen on that front, which I'm like, okay, so she, it's selective with the show's obviously being very selective when they drop certain information like that too. She's like, yeah, I would never hurt a child. I know how much a child can mean to a mother, but I will literally kill everyone else in your family. So I wanted Tulko and them know that they were dealing with someone from the CIA. I mean, to be fair, he's a lawyer, so it's not like, oh, you're dealing with a CIA agent, there's going to be repercussions. It's like, no, I'm a lawyer, so we'll see. But it's like, once again, even Owen was like, yeah, neither one of us wants Max in our lives. Like, let's just never see each other again. Which I love that's a theme in this episode, because he talks to that lady by the hotel, at the motel he was staying at, and he kind of vented to her about like, yeah, my mom was kind of a little off her rocker a little bit, and he's like, I haven't talked to her since like law school, and he's like, I try, but he always feels like the more I try, it almost feels like that's the worst things get. And she's like, why are you telling me that? He's like, I know sometimes it's easier to tell a stranger stuff, it's easier to open up to him, plus most likelihood we will never see each other again, so I don't have to worry about or care about you judging me. And so the lady opened up about her dad dying recently, and kind of he was like the person that made it kind of feel like, hey, everything's okay, the world's going to be okay, you're going to be okay, which he kind of understands that too, because it's like, yeah, my dad died when I was 12, and my mom, that's kind of what sent her over the edge, and he tried to be the man in the house, and it's just like, it kind of put a lot on him, and he kind of took a lot on that himself. It kind of also neatly ties into the conversation he has with Hannah, where she was, saying like, why are you doing this? Like, there would be so many firms that would like grab you up in an instant, but it's like, you're going above and beyond with the CIA. Even she's like, I don't actually know why you're doing this. Like, is it just to prove your mom wrong, your crazy mom wrong? And it's like, but it's like, what is your real reasoning for doing that? She's like, I legitimately don't understand. Like, she's like saying like, you're always kind of running head first into trouble, and he's kind of being like, yeah, like it'll figure itself out if I just keep at it. It's like, oh, I'm ambitious, and she's like, no, it's not ambition. It's just like there's something off, and I'm not sure exactly what it is. It kind of like, why'd you even join? Like, why'd you want to join the CIA? Why'd you even want to be a lawyer? And it's like, yeah, it can't just be about your mom. And he's like, it's for her, it's like, I see you making a mistake. He's like, I'm 24. This is the time you're supposed to be making mistakes, right? And she's like, yeah, but it's just like, this doesn't feel like the right type of mistakes you should be making at that time. And, because she also says like, she's worried that like the bad habits he has, like being a part of the CIA will just aggravate those like bad elements inside of his character and just heighten them more, which I could see that element to it. So that's definitely going to be, I think that's such an interesting element where it's like, hey, they are the ones kind of, are they actual exes, or is that just kind of a joke of like, oh, your mom still thinks we're dating? I guess that was supposed to be like, kind of maybe like implying like, right, once again, his mom's not like mentally all there, so maybe that's what that was mostly, because I thought like, wait, I thought you guys actually did date. I think it is just like, no, you're all roommates, or maybe they actually did date. I'm not 100% clear on that dynamic now. I guess it's because like I've never been in that situation where like at some point in time I was in a good place with my exes, but that in the long run wasn't a good, it's just, I didn't give myself time to heal before I went into the friend process with exes. So that's why I'm like, I don't know whether they've just like severely figured that out. I mean, for some people, they're able to figure out, make it work. I haven't had much luck in that department. But that's why I was just wondering, like, that's why I'm like, oh, whether that line of dialogue last episode could have just been like, oh, your mom thinks we're dating or still dating or something like that. So that could just be his mom thing, or it could just be, no, they actually did date and they just broke up and they're just really still pretty tight after everything, But handling the Vienna situation, he was just like, oh boy, he was in a city of crocodiles just ready to take a bite out of him, because it's like Vienna is spy central. The best of the best goes there. And the moment he gets in there, like he opens something, he's reading a note and the person behind him is reading it. You're like, Jesus, dude, it's very amateurish, but you also think like, oh yeah, like people do that all the time in movies and stuff like that. Yeah, you never know who, but it's like, yeah, he opens it in a way the person behind him just has to turn and look like, oh, I got that. I was like, oh, dude. And like everywhere he went, you could tell people were clocking him. And it's like, yeah, the guy he went there to see is like, I'm not about to get exposed for this amateur show. So, hey, let's go to a secure room. We talk it out. And I do love that Owen tried to be in control. Like, hey, take a seat. First, he kind of went along with it until he stood up later on, because Owen's like, right, so what's her whole deal? Well, he's trying to pretend like, oh, I didn't really know her, which we as the audience know is complete and utter BS. The one instance between them, we saw it, because they kind of left her high and dry. She was supposed to come to America and didn't, like, to kind of lay low until everything was over with, and then she can come back. Once again, it's, oh God, what was the term that they used? Basically, Belarus had become a hot spot and she couldn't stay here anymore. And so she kind of was set up with, well, because she actually was trying to get back, but she's like, I don't know the person's name. And so, like, the CIA was giving her the runaround and wasn't listening to her. So she kind of got stuck in America. And I guess she had to try to make ends meet until she could, I guess, like, everything she was doing was for the purposes of, like, all that she was kind of caught up in here in America for the past 5 years has been about trying to make her way back home, I guess. Fine, so I don't know if it's all been aiming towards something CIA related to get her back home, or just running like businesses and creating contacts and connections that could get her back home. Because Talco said that he met Max because she set up a very niche business, but she betrayed him. It's like, yeah, that's kind of what she does. She uses people and she'll stab you in the back. So, but he also finds out that what makes Max so special, what knowledge she has on hand, is that it's like, right, here's an asset that like no one really wants to acknowledge. She's kind of from outside of everything. She was kind of like not with the CIA. She kind of worked for the CIA. She was an asset that was led to lead other assets. So she knows the name of all the agents in Belarus and Russia, so she could expose them, and that could lead to a lot of, well, not only compromise operations, but more importantly, I'm sure the argument government-wise could be like, no, the CIA operation being compromised is more important, but it's like, there's going to be a lot of dead agents compromised, so that's going to lead to a lot of agents getting compromised and potentially killed. So it is a situation that we have to kind of meet Max's demands to some extent. But now it's like, right, you have a better understanding. And it's like, okay. And I love that the guy slipped up. And I thought that was a really neat catch. Was like, he said that he heard Max's name once or twice. But he's like, no. I thought you said, he's like, no, I said that. He's like, no, you said you heard her name once or twice. Now you're saying you've actually met her. He's like, in passing. And it's like, yeah, like, I think it kind of irked his nerves that he kind of slipped up in front. He's like, this rank amateur, I slipped in front of him. It's like, yeah, when you get a little too comfortable, you kind of you're like underestimating him. You're up there eating, thinking like, oh, I'm going to run circles around this kid. And he caught up to you slipping, It's like, right. Like, I mean, he's still a novice in all of this, but he's kind of slowly got ahead for her. He's kind of figuring things out to some extent. So, the kind of runaround Home Dude was giving him. But, sadly, assassins got sent after him, because obviously for Owen, it's like, wait, this doesn't make any sense. is that picture of the person whose cab this is that your grandfather? It's like, she's an assassin, you have to kill her. What? No, I can't do that. It's like, kill her or she's going to kill you. He's like, no, I'm not going to kill her. Then the assassin pulls out the gun. He ends up having to choke her with the seatbelt, but he doesn't want to kill her, so he ends up knocking her out, running away on foot, having to steal a car, but he ends up crashing. Once again, it's not that high-speed chase sequence of like, yeah, I get away, and like at one point, I thought how it was going to end. It's like he's going to run away, and as he's running through traffic, she's speeding along, and then she gets T-boned or something. But it's like, no, she ends up catching up with him. Another assassin catch up with him after he got out on foot. I love that he's apologizing and stuff. She's like, stop apologizing. He's like, I can't help it. This is my first carjacking. He has to jump in the river. Luckily gets away. It's just like, man, that was a complete and utter clusterfuck of a situation. So, and I thought that was so fascinating. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.